The 2025 NFL season has now concluded, and we are now in the playoffs where teams fight and claw their way to try and win a Super Bowl. 18 teams are now sitting at home, reflecting, trying to see how they can play in January of 2027 for a Super Bowl. And one of those teams are the Las Vegas Raiders. They have the worst record in 2025, and they should not have been that bad this year. They had a very solid offseason last year, bringing in Pete Carroll as a head coach, signing Geno Smith to be the franchise quarterback, bringing in Chip Kelly for his second NFL stint as the OC after winning a national championship with the Ohio State Buckeyes. And they also drafted the best running back prospect in Ashton Jeanty from Boise State. And that does not include some really solid pieces on the roster already. Obviously, a top 5 pass rusher in Max Crosby. They have a top tight end in Brock Bowers, a very solid receiver in Jakobi Meyers, and just overall a solid group that needed some more depth and the right coaching staff. And the crazy part is they go on the road and beat the New England Patriots 20-13. But after that, it was a wrap. Their next 4 games, they gave up 40 points twice, one to the Washington Commanders and one to the Colts. And overall, throughout the season, they had 4 games. They had 2 shutouts, but 2 other games to where they did not score over 10 points. And they had the worst scoring offense in the NFL, only averaging 14 points per game. In a 60-minute professional football game, you only scored 2 touchdowns. That is, embarrassing. And you know what? A lot of people, I want to say after like week 4, week 5, a lot of people saw a lot of holes in this team. Geno Smith was a very big mistake. Pete Carroll is washed up and old. Chip Kelly is still a bad offensive-minded coach. Ashton Jeanty being picked in the top 10 was a very bad idea. You should have drafted a tackle or a defensive line piece. And trading top target Jakobi Meyers for the future will hurt them, I guarantee you. But somehow, someway, there is hope for this team going into 2026. In the NFL, we see tons of turnarounds with the right coaching staff, with the right GM, with the right quarterback. And I think the Las Vegas Raiders are in a good position, but they got to make the right moves at the right time. Now, we see it with the Washington Commanders in 2024 with Jayden Daniels and Dan Quinn. First year, they made the NFC Championship game. Or like the Chicago Bears when they brought in a really good offensive-minded coach in Ben Johnson to work with Caleb Williams. And now they're in the playoffs, and they're seeking their first playoff win in a very long time. And I do think the Las Vegas Raiders, again, with the right coaching staff, with the right GM, they can make a really big turnaround. And in today's video, I'm going to show you how and why. Now, first things first, it was really good that they fired Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly, I'm just going to be really blunt and honest, just not a good NFL coach. Not a good OC, DC, whatever, C, coach, whatever. With the Eagles, he was terrible. And with the Raiders, he was worse. And there was a lot of reports saying Geno Smith and Pete Carroll not being on the same page. A lot of plays that were not installed during practice, but somehow, some way being ran in the game, which is just very, very dumb. And a lot of other shenanigans with Chip Kelly. He's long and gone in Northwestern. And with Pete Carroll, I love Pete Carroll. You know, he was the coach of one of my childhood teams, the Seattle Seahawks. I love Earl Thomas and everything like that. But again, just not a good coach in 2026. And we saw the decline in Seattle in real time. And the Raiders said, you know what? That's going to be our coach. And I do think if they bring in like a Ben Johnson or somebody with a offensive minded mindset in 2026, they'll be good. And or honestly, Brian Flores going into Las Vegas with a defensive minded philosophy with Max Crosby. You got Eric Stokes, which, fun fact, he gave up the least amount of yards in 2025, solid, whatever. But anyways, you have him. John Harbaugh, he's going to be very hard to get, mainly because John Harbaugh, I do think he wants a solidified quarterback and not take a chance on anybody in the draft, which we'll get to. Or you can get a guy like Cliff Kingsbury, very offensive-minded, heavy, really good with quarterbacks, young quarterback. There's a lot of options out there. The Raiders have to key in on what they want with a head coach and with an OC. Now, as far as the roster being constructed in 2026, the Las Vegas Raiders actually have the 3rd most salary cap space in 2026. They have little to no dead cap already, which Geno Smith might take up a lot of that dead cap depending on if they keep him or not. But the Raiders, they have a lot of flexibility with their cap space, and there are some really good names out there. And also on their own roster, they have somebody who they could trade and get more draft capital, more young talent, and that's Maxx Crosby. Maxx Crosby at this point, I think he's unhappy with the Raiders. Obviously, he's one of the highest paid defenders in the NFL, but it's just not panning out. Trade him to a contender or trade him to a mid-tier team to where you can get some valuable draft capital. You obviously want this year's first-round pick, but you want to get either A, young talent, or B, more draft capital for the future so you're set. And I've always viewed guys like Maxx Crosby or even Myles Garrett like the Lambo and like the trailer home meme or whatever, that analogy where like there's this super nice car but it's in like this rundown home and it just doesn't fit. And that's how I view Maxx Crosby, a premier pass rusher, a premier player, just in the wrong situation to where we really don't get to see how great he is. Myles Garrett, he had like 23 sacks this year, and once he got like to 17, 18, or yeah, about 17, 18 sacks, that's when people wanted to tune into Browns games. Obviously, Shedeur Sanders, but no, I don't care. Myles Garrett getting all those sacks, that's what made people want to tune into him. And Maxx Crosby, I mean, unless he's doing something like that, people will just not see how great he is as a player. Now, this is a little bit of a sidebar, but the Las Vegas Raiders defensive line was supposed to be a lot better. And they drafted a defensive end back in 2023, right before the Eagles got Jalen Carter, and he was supposed to be a lot better in his NFL career up until this point, and that's Tyree Wilson. Tyree Wilson has gone under the scene, underrated to be one of the biggest draft busts in NFL history. Okay, coming in at 6'5", 260 pounds from Texas Tech, has that Carlos Dunlap build, really big. He has a really solid first step, a lot of power to his game. The dude only has 12 sacks in 3 seasons. And this year he only had 4. And it's just, when you watch him play football, bro, it is embarrassing, bro. It's like they just pull him out of game, don't let him play for long periods of time. And it's like, I actually had a lot of hope for him when he came out of Texas Tech. And again, him being paired up with Maxx Crosby. Remember, they signed Christian Wilkins, I think, last year. I thought this defensive line was going to be good. He's going to have a lot of one-on-ones, but it's just not panning out. The dude is like very, very bad. I'm just going to call it for what it is. Now, to go back to their free agency and things like that, there are very solid players on the free agency market that can come in and can contribute for the Las Vegas Raiders. One of them being Mike Evans. Now, yes, I do know he is advanced in age, getting up there in age. He's slowing down, injuries and things like that. However, would you want to have him on your roster if you bring in a guy like Fernando Mendoza, to build his confidence, to kind of have that secure blanket with your young quarterback? I would definitely overpay a guy like Mike Evans for that reason, because you don't want to have a young quarterback with little to no wide receiver targets and you just want him to just, figure it out. No, bring in a solid, secure blanket in Mike Evans, who's very consistent when healthy. And speaking of overpay, which you have in the third most salary cap space, you can bring in a safety like Jalen Thompson from the Cardinals. Again, you got to overpay him to bring him to Las Vegas, but I think it's worth it just seeing how bad the team is. Hassan Reddick, Joey Bosa, even like Khalil Mack, I would just stay away. They're older pass rushers, and there are plenty of pass rushers in the draft. Now, regarding the NFL draft, the Las Vegas Raiders have the top overall pick going into it. Number 1, they can set the tone for the NFL draft. And a lot of people are saying draft Fernando Mendoza, which would be a very good pick. The Heisman winning quarterback on a really good historic run in the playoffs, or just season overall, sorry. But I do think, however, if they say we don't want to draft the quarterback yet, let's get better as a roster before we bring in a franchise quarterback, I won't be mad at that. But there are just two players that you can bring in. One of them being Ruben Bain. The dude has been phenomenal all his college career. Go back to his freshman year. As a true freshman, he was dominating. And this year in the playoffs, everybody's seeing he's just causing havoc. And another player who just nobody really saw to be this good this year is Arvell Reese. Now, Arvell Reese, He's kind of like, to me, like that Micah Parsons role. Like, he is a off-ball linebacker, but he is showing potential to be a edge rusher. Now that is up to the Raiders, up to him to see if he wants to be an edge rusher. But if he's an edge rusher or a part-time edge rusher, I wouldn't mind getting him. From the standpoint of, okay, he can be a hybrid linebacker in edge. We still got Max Crosby or whatever, but those are the only three guys you can really go with. Either Fernando Mendoza, or again, you can trade back and get some more draft capital, get some more things. Trade back 3 or 4 picks and then get a guy like Arvell Reese. But overall, when you having the first overall pick, it is going to be a lot of pressure, and those are kind of like for generational talent or franchise quarterbacks. So I do think ultimately they will get Fernando Mendoza, especially him winning the Heisman, potentially winning the college football playoffs, national championship. So it may just be Fernando Mendoza bringing in solid receivers like Mike Evans. You're still going to have Dante Thornton. You still have Ashton Jeanty, but hopefully they splurge and develop the offensive line, because my philosophy is, if you have a great offensive line, that's going to mean 9 times out of 10 you're going to have a great team. You can run the ball. The QB can actually go through his progressions and things like that. But if you have a bad offensive line, things are rushed. You can't establish the run game or nothing crazy like that. Defensively, if they keep Max Crosby, you still want to build around him. Get rid of Tyree Wilson. Christian Wilkins is not there anymore, obviously. You want to build some other pieces around him, because teams are just going to double team him. Have the running back chip his way out. Have the tight end with the tackle or whatever. So I do think defensively, there is a lot of potential there with Max Crosby. Without Max Crosby, that's going to kill them, obviously. But these are just my thoughts going into the 2026 offseason, and just a very too early / vague, scenario for the Las Vegas Raiders. And we got February with the draft combine. We got March with the actual free agency and all that other stuff. April is the draft. So we still got plenty of time. We got draft evaluations and all this other stuff. So I just can't wait to see what happens. But with the Las Vegas Raiders, I do see a lot of potential with them. But the Raiders have to play their cards really phenomenal. But that's going to conclude this video. If you like this video, make sure you like, comment, and like and subscribe, and please comment what you think. Did I get this right? Did I get this wrong, or whatever? But I'm out, man. Peace.